With the increase of international travel, as well as the greater numbers of marriages between nationals of different countries and United States citizens, international child abductions are on the rise. My presentation today is based on my experiences representing many clients over the course of the past few years, as well as written materials that have been previously authored in the field. Since the 1970s, the State Department has received over 11,000 reports of American children being abducted and taken to foreign countries. The number is always on the rise. Unfortunately, the annual number of children abducted from the United States has risen dramatically since then, and these are only reported cases that we have. While representing a Saudi diplomat in 1994, I had the privilege of first meeting Pat, who you just heard from, who introduced herself to me, advocating that her circumstance could further expose Saudi complicity, corruption, and that her plight could benefit from my involvement. Since then, Pat and I had taken her cause to the highest levels of our government. We've marched ourselves through the halls of Congress, we've made law, we've made noise, we've impassioned others to fill the large gaps in our law. I've represented Pat since 1994 without a fee, and many others since then, all on a pro bono basis. My heart goes out to these dear parents for the misery that they've endured, and I find it personally rewarding to see that these laws are ultimately changed. I am sure that our founding fathers would be quite disappointed that our government could broker tremendous financial arrangements with nations, even friendly nations, and negotiate the placement of military installations in troubled regions. But when it comes to negotiating the return of young children or negotiating family disputes, our government turns its shoulder to its own citizenry. I have been asked to consult on major network television with regard to the Ellen Gonzalez matter, where many of these concerns have been raised. Whether you feel he was improperly abducted by his mother and should return to his father in Cuba, or you believe that he deserves to remain in the United States, most would argue that we would all benefit from the exposure and the precedent that will be hopefully culled out from this international escapade. I can venture to say that no one in this room would like to see the young boy separated from his parent. Yet I believe that the Attorney General did not act in an appropriate fashion in this manner. She could have averted the use of force had she ultimately entertained the first applications when the young boy's father was not on U.S. soil. More importantly, the fact that there is no settled law to ameliorate this dispute shows us that we have a lot of ground to cover. The precedent established in this case will have legal and political reverberations for many years to come. This case should have been off the streets, where politics and distorted issues played heavily, and into our system a lot earlier. What I find most intolerable is that the U.S. government has spent so much time in our tax resources when so many of our citizens have been ignored internationally. The government has clearly taken advantage of the confusing legal arguments and the several venues involved in this matter. The most that we can expect from the State Department in all these other cases is a list of attorneys, a welfare visit, and a sympathetic ear. Even the Justice Department fails to file international warrants in many cases, labeling these parental abduction matters as domestic custody disputes. This is not acceptable when we pride ourselves as the moral compass of the world. Parents who would spirit their children away to foreign territories are no different than any other kidnapper and are considered criminals. The photo of the young boy being returned to his father at the muzzle of a gun speaks very loudly that legislation and support is badly needed in this arena. Is this how we expect our children to be treated overseas when we want our children returned? Is the State Department and Justice Department condoning the use of force here? The State Department has adopted a policy of neutrality rather than advocating, as Pat has done, for the recovery of our children. Our young citizens ought to be able to enter our embassies abroad, secure their U.S. passports, and the protection of our government, which should then take strong diplomatic positions on such issues and return them to our shores. I can think of no greater purpose for our embassies to serve. Why are they there? How many children would still be with their parents if we instituted simple measures? Congress needs to enact statutes which would sanction governments who permit kidnapping. They must vigilantly prosecute kidnappers and send a strong message to the governments of the world as to avert the years of devastation that families go through because of state, federal, and international legal loopholes. Last week, I was able to assist in the returning of 2 young children kidnapped to France, where a family court in New York nearly refused to accept jurisdiction over the matter because the mother was not an American citizen or a permanent resident, but was here on a temporary visa, and the attorney and the law secretary to the judge did not have a firm understanding of U.S. immigration law. Often there is a complex confluence of immigration, international, family, state, criminal practice, which need to be mastered by attorneys representing their clients. I'm not an expert on Hague Convention or family law. I felt it appropriate, in view of the many experiences that I've had, to separate my presentation so as to provide more practical guidance to those who've either found themselves in circumstances where unfortunately your children have been abducted, and those who feel that they are at risk or could help other people that are at risk. Prevention of abductions. Simply put, if you or a loved one is involved in a cross-cultural relationship, you need to evaluate your vulnerability and try to determine if you are indeed at risk. I've even found, and the State Department has reported, that the rooting of an individual's intentions to eventually abduct a child could happen on family vacations or even in the celebration of international holidays. These trips need to be carefully watched. I would suggest that couples secure, when they first get married, as many names, addresses, contacts, and data that they can get their hands on. This includes records of passports, bank accounts, driver's licenses, any old utility bills that you can get your hands on. The more writings you have, the more leads you will succeed in following the future. I've suggested taking many photos and fingerprints of your children on a regular basis, even along on your person when you travel, so that you are prepared for all eventualities. These are things that police authorities could do. I'm a councilman in my town in New Jersey. I expect to turn over to the police the charge of having a fingerprinting session in local schools, or offering it for parents, or at least bring the information out there. Why not? I know parents who teach the children how to collect calls and create all kinds of contingency plans. God forbid they're separated when they go to Disney World. Finally, if you feel that you are at risk, it's very important that you enlist a good attorney and learn all of your strongest legal options and a plan accordingly. Often clients, as well as members of the family, require much emotional support, and enlisting a good therapist for siblings and for family members is very important, because you'll need all the support you can get from your loved ones to meet the challenges that you will face. Just because a couple has problems does not necessarily mean that they need to go to war over their children. With today's society as mobile as it is, separation agreements could be so flexible, and international child abductions could be averted with some creativity. I've heard from scores of parents that have prevented abductions by simply negotiating terms and leveraging what they can, both informally or in the court system. Of course, if you feel that you are at total imminent risk, bodyguards should be hired, 24-hour effort should be put into securing all of your legal rights, and the child's protection and yours should be of paramount importance. Of course, many of you are sitting here, why didn't you tell me this before? Why didn't I have this sense? I should have known, I could have known. But you all will find yourselves as experts to people who unfortunately will follow in your tracks. And I am rest assured, because of the good efforts of Pat and the few video cameras that we have coming in and out of this conference, that the momentum will build and laws will follow, because we are a government of laws, and we elect and we unelect our officials. Once you've determined that you are vulnerable and that your marriage is at an impasse, I would recommend securing a decree of sole custody, including an order preventing any travel abroad. Some courts will require a bond to be posted as a deterrent, and these measures could be provided in separation agreements as well. You should secure as many certified copies of these documents so that you can provide them to your schools or other custodial guardians of your children. Certainly, you should alert the U.S. State Department, the Passport Division, to stop the issuance of a U.S. passport, and we'll talk about foreign passports at a later time. Foreign embassies of the United States should be alerted as well. If a child is abducted, the first priority is to determine the exact location of the child and to secure an automatic freeze order from your state and federal authorities. Whether you call your local police, FBI, or other law enforcement contacts you have, what's critical, I find, is to have an exacting written summary of the actual circumstances perpetrated during the actual course of the abduction. This is information that not only will help the police authority investigators, but you will need in the legal system with specificity as to whether or not a parent